watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.
Hi, everybody. This is time for another edition of The Paul Stefan Show. And tonight, my guest is Mr. Pat Gavin, local filmmaker of Explore Baltimore. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you.
Now, tell us a little bit about your background. Did you grow up in the Baltimore area?
I was born at GBMC, so in the area, not probably technically the city. But my parents divorced early, so I grew up in Bel Air. But my dad was always like a city guy. So on the weekends, we would go downtown and go to Orioles games or Cross Street Market and things like that. But, so I have kind of like I'm like a dual citizen in a way where I'm like I have the suburbs and then the city kind of in me as well. And I live in Pigtown right now. I've lived there for probably almost 2 years now.
And was it like your dad from the city or something?
He was from Waverly.
Oh, yeah, let's see.
Yeah.
So, but where did the interest come for you to film Baltimore?
I think what did it for me is I just kind of noticed like in the media when people think of Baltimore and you hear the things that they say, it's always like, oh, The Wire, drugs, crime. But I mean, you talk to people that live here, they're like, oh, I love Baltimore, I love Charm City, and you kind of like, what makes people love it, and there's not a great representation of that on the internet or in the media in general. Right. So I was like, what if I just started to film the different things that I did, just kind of on my daily adventures, like usually on the weekend is when I film most stuff, and then show everyone all this stuff that's not really getting out there into the open as much.
Mm-hmm. But you don't make a living as a filmmaker.
Oh no, I'm an auto mechanic by trade. This is just something I do. I've been an amateur photographer for about 15 years, and that's mostly what I did before this was take photos. I've been already taking photos of stuff all over Baltimore, so now I'm taking photos and video at the same time. But I decided about the last year that I thought the medium of YouTube is really interesting. How you look at a photograph, you might look at it for a couple seconds and then you move on. But the video, you might be able to capture someone's attention for 5, 10, 15 minutes or something like that. So I thought like almost as a business venture and as a way to get your name out there, the idea of it is to hopefully get people to give donations. It's almost like a side job in a way to get donations. Of like if I'm making good content, and you have to get to that point where you make enough stuff that people are going to want to do that. But that's kind of my ultimate goal, at least, is to be kind of like a part-time job making videos about Baltimore.
Okay. Well, where did the interest in photography come from?
My dad was always into photography ever since we were a kid. He was always like that guy. It's like, here, you guys pose in front of this. And, when you're a kid, you're like, I don't care about this. But it's like, when you look back on that, you really value that. And that's something that kind of stuck with me my whole life. Is kind of like, you think about those things in your childhood, like the things that are most important to you seem like the most mundane things. You're like, I grew up in Bel Air effectively. So there'd be like Pepe's Meat. There was a place called Pepe's Meats, and we used to go in there and they'd give you the little sample of meat when you're a kid and stuff like that. And then one day, probably 5 years ago, you drive by and it's like, oh, it's not even there. It's like completely demolished. And you're like, you know what? I wish I had a picture of that, or I wish I had more than just a memory of stuff like that. So then as you get older, like all the things that, the world changes so much. I mean, I'm 34, so it's not as different as it might be from someone from like different generation. But my dad, he's an old school Baltimore guy, so he's always like, he lived in Waverly, so he used to go to Memorial Stadium all the time. And he had a million stories of like, following the players after they left and like hounding them for autographs and all that stuff. So then you kind of wonder like, oh, I wish I could see that. And I did get a chance to, when I was pretty young, I did go to Memorial Stadium, but it's like all the things that he talks about and then like other people talk about, like over time, it just sort of disappears. And I thought like, photographs are a great way to capture that. Video is great to capture it. Like the world will never be the same as it is right now, and everything is constantly changing. So I thought it's like, to me, I'm like almost like an obsession to document as much different things as you can.
Because one thing I guess I would say is that when there was a little video piece done by the Baltimore Sun, they called you a street photographer and an urban explorer. Do you think that those describe you well?
Well, that project was it was done by a guy named John Sham, who doesn't work for the Sun anymore, but he did at that time, and he was producing it was like a weekly series of different. It was about street photography and street photographers. So you kind of they didn't want like 20 people like I take pictures of row houses or something. They needed, you kind of had to have a niche, so each one was a little different. And for probably the last 10 years, I've always been like really fascinated by abandoned buildings and how, it's like sort of life cycle of a building where, here's something that has a lot of value and people are going to it, and then the business closes and then it stays vacant and then the windows get broken out and then it gets demolished. Like that's always been really fascinating to me. So I've been taking pictures of like abandoned buildings and stuff a lot. So then he was like, well, I think the niche for this video should be like urban exploration is, what you call people that go into abandoned buildings and things like that. So that's just kind of the reason for that. But I've always been, just, most of the time, like I'll just drive around on the weekends and you just observe like, oh, this new piece of graffiti showed up, or, oh, they're building this new building, or they're demolishing this, or things are constantly changing. I'm just always trying to like stay on top of it and document as much stuff as possible.
Well, I mean, that's good. I mean, it was reminding me when it said street photography, I was thinking of some of the great ones. I don't know if you are aware of some of the old photographers who used to do that sort of thing, in France especially, with Atget and Versailles.
I would never compare myself to any of those. It's more of like, I don't know. I kind of consider myself I'm not really like an artist. I'm more of like a documenter. Like okay. I align more with that than someone's like trying to create greatness, or like I just want to document this thing and kind of make the most honest interpretation of it. Like I don't want it to look better or worse than it really is. I just want like just look through a window of this piece of time and just kind of accurately represent that. And
with that too, I mean, there's a flavor of this. Is there interest in history that you have?
I definitely lean hard towards history.
And where does that come
with the video? It's hard to say. My mom is really into history, so maybe some of that. And my dad's into like, he kind of is a part of Baltimore history in a way. It's not like he's so much into it. He's into it because he lived it. But my mom, she loves like the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and stuff like that. So she's always talking about stuff like that. So then maybe in my way, I've kind of always been more interested in like maybe like post-industrial revolution stuff, like 20s, 30s, up to the 50s. I love like manufacturing and factories and stuff like that. I was always really fascinated for like a long time, and even now, but not as much. I like would go to antique stores and you'll see like different products like, oh, this was made in Baltimore, and I always thought that was really fascinating. Like for instance, people know Bromo Seltzer.
Right.
Well, Maryland Glass was the company that made the blue bottles, and they were owned by the same guy. So then Maryland Glass is down kind of in Morrill Park, I guess, is probably what it would be considered. So then that was abandoned for a while. So it's kind of fascinating. You have Bromo Seltzer Arts Tower, which is, a restored clock tower, and it's pretty cool. And then you have this. You have all these different kind of, you could see the product. This is where it was made. This is where the bottle was made. And then it's decaying. And now they demolished part of that. And it's part of like Holly Poultry now. So everything, the world is just changing. I don't know. I just always found it fascinating. Like the idea of making things here just seems so special to me. It's just something that like my generation doesn't know anything about that. I mean, there just isn't, you're not making anything like it used to. And there's a real pride in that. And I think Baltimore is a very blue collar town. And I think that like really resonates with a lot of people. They take a lot of pride. People still talk about the Baltimore Colts, even though, they left a long time ago and, now they're in Indianapolis. But, there's a lot of nostalgia for Baltimore, and it has a lot of problems now. So maybe that's why, people remember the good old days. But then that's kind of what I do as well, is I like to document the good things that are still around as well. But I have an honest, real interpretation. I don't try to make it represent it any way other than it really is.
And in watching YouTube, who do you watch or follow, or who maybe were your influences for what you do?
A couple. The biggest one that really inspired me to make things on YouTube, there's a guy named Casey Neistat, and he's probably like the most popular like vlogger. And then you watch his video, and it's like sometimes he does these really amazing things, like he's flying to Dubai or something. But then like really the things I like the most were like he's just riding a skateboard through New York and talking. And I was like, it's like there's no one in Baltimore like doing like that. And I was like, I'm not really like an in front of the camera guy as much. But I was like, well, what if someone documented just all the the daily things that they do in Baltimore? And that's kind of the inspiration for me to do it. Like at least like a YouTube type video thing. And then there was another guy, there's another really good YouTube show that is Baltimore based, and it was called History at Risk. Okay. It was done by a guy named Frank Tybush. I think he moved away, so I'm not sure if he's still doing that anymore. Probably not really able to.
And what
but that was a really good.
What is his videos like?
He would go to like, like he went, I know one I watched recently was like Turkey Joe's in Fells Point. He went and he talked to, the guy's still alive, the bar doesn't exist anymore, but he went and he talked about like his beer collection. I guess the idea is like these things are like teetering on the edge of like, might go out of business or this might get demolished. She's like, this is an important time that we, document it right now because it could be lost forever.
Well, since we mentioned him, what about Dan Bell?
Dan Bell, I'm not super familiar with Dan Bell. I have watched some of his videos. Yeah. He's definitely probably the most prominent. He does a lot of things that aren't necessarily he does Baltimore stuff, but not necessarily all Baltimore. So I haven't focused. I try not. The one thing I want to do is not make a copy of something that someone else is doing, which is a problem. You don't want to step on someone else's toes or something like that.
Well, then how is yours different?
His does a lot of kind of first person talking in his videos. Mine I rarely appear in it. I've narrated a couple. I don't really enjoy the sound of my own voice, so I do it more through text. Honestly, I'd rather just have a caption come up on the screen. But mine's more of the first person experience. If you were doing it yourself and you were going to places. I do a lot of drones really changed the game for me making videos. The stuff, 10 years ago, you imagine, if I could only get in this position, that would be a great photo, or that'd be a great something. It's now you have this little thing that costs, $1,000, isn't that much in the video world, and it can do, crazy things or whatever. So that was really one of the things, I had so much footage, I was I need to do something with this. So that really opened things up because, the more different angles you have, it just makes for an interesting video, and I think that's really, kind of changed the game.
Because I think for part of it, that's one of the things I found impressive about your videos are the drone cam shots that, again, nobody's really, I don't think, doing extensely yet. Certainly not in Baltimore at all.
Yeah, there's people, but I don't know if there's any central this guy has a million things of Baltimore. That's another thing. I was this, you're kind of at the beginning of that technology, in general, the average person still doesn't have one. You can go to Best Buy and buy one, but it's just for all the people I know that own cameras, hardly anyone owns drones. And maybe in the last couple months it started. So I had maybe a little a year jump on some people getting. So the market may become flooded soon, but
make some great ones like the one you most recently did on the Rollins Conservatory.
Yeah,
and the opening shot.
It's funny, if you watch that video, there's two guys walking in front, and they literally were coming to do the same thing. They had the same drone and everything, and they so if I would have stayed there for 5 minutes more, there probably would have been two of them flying around.
Two drones. But I think that's really something you bring is the drone camera.
Yeah, it's really fun to do. It really gets, it's the closest thing to flying you can get with your feet leaving the ground.
Well, how do you pick the topics for your videos or your subjects?
A lot of times, for instance, there was an event called Doors Open Baltimore recently, and what that is, it's once a year. It used to be just Saturdays. They've expanded to Saturday and Sunday now, but it'll be kind of a self-guided tour. So all these places that aren't normal, some are normally open, but some aren't normally open. That's the things I try to focus on. There's I don't know if it's open all the time. There's a thing called Davidge Hall, which is a University of Maryland medical thing. And they have there's mummies and things in there. There's pretty wild stuff. And just architecturally, that's something that I don't know if the public really even knows exists. You probably drive by it. It's really close to Camden Yards, so people probably drive by it and never seen it. And there's a lot of other great things. One of my favorite ones that they have is the Arabber stable. And I do have, I've literally an hour ago or whatever, finished editing that video. Wow. So that'll be one of the new ones that comes out. But it's a really surreal place because it's in the middle of you can't imagine a more urban environment. There's abandoned houses. It's it is The Wire that you picture from the Baltimore, but then you're inside of these stables and it's horses and pigs and cows and chickens. It's very surreal. It's a farm in the middle of the city that you would never know is there. So I had a lot of fun doing that because the animals, they react to you and sometimes they're trying to run away from you and they don't know what you're doing. But yeah, those guys down there were really cool. So stuff like that opens up. If I see the opportunity of this thing's having an open house or whatever, or weather actually plays a lot. If I'm going to drone something, I prefer it to always be a sunny sky because it just doesn't look great. It doesn't look great when it's overcast. Okay. I have a lot of other things I filmed that it's just the amount of footage I have, it's just going to take so long. I filmed multiple things of Camden Yards, and that someday will be released. I just don't know when I'll have the time to edit all that stuff down.
Now, also in the video, a lot of times there are multiple subjects in your video. And what is the choices that you make of what goes with what, or what you
I kind of told myself,
here's one video of just one thing, but here's one with 3 or 4 things.
I kind of told myself I wanted them to be about 7 minutes, but sometimes you just can't stretch that much time out. I try to, lean towards like appealing to people that don't have a super, they're not going to watch a 20-minute video of me just talking or whatever.
Right.
So I want it to be interesting and to be constant content coming at you.
Okay.
I kind of lost my train of thought now.
That's okay. You think and come back.
Oh, I guess no.
Go ahead.
No, I know. It's like, well, sometimes I'll do like a theme. There might not be like might not be obvious with what the theme is. There was one that was like a demolition episode where there's demolishing different things. I had some older footage from years ago where demolishing things. Recently, I forget what the newest one. There was a newer one that was it was the Mount Clair house, and they had done like a Halloween thing. And then there was I did an episode where it was like kind of like of different events in Baltimore. So there was Hamden Fest, and then there's a thing called Charm City Cyclocross, which is a bike race. So I figured like that's a once a weekend event, so I would just add them. I try to aim to be like 7 minutes at least. So if I have a bunch of short ones, I might just save them and add them together. So that sometimes comes into play, I guess.
So I was going to ask you about that. The average length you're looking for is about 7 minutes.
At least 7, like 7 to 15. I feel like you probably lose people's attention if it's too long or you stay on the same subject for too long.
Okay. And so, here's one thing I found impressive too, is your use of music in videos. And a lot of things, I think it's really great, what you decide, what goes with what, and all that kind of. For example, the one, because it was the most recent one, I just remember it the best, in the Rollins Conservatory, and you go to each room, and each room you have a different tune playing.
That's definitely a problem when you make a video, because you're like, what if the video is 6 minutes long, but like I want to use this song. This song's like 3.5 minutes long. How do I fit that in there? But that video kind of solved itself, because I was like, well, I'll play like Hawaiian music in the tropical room, and I'll play like Western swing music in the desert room or whatever. So that made it easy. But then I use a program called Adobe Premiere. It's just the elements. It's not even like the high-end version of it, but it has a really amazing feature where it's called like the remix feature, where it just picks up on the pattern of a song and it can stretch it out, and like, so it'll actually to a degree fit it. Once in a while you'll listen to it and you'll hear like a hiccup in it where it's like, okay, then you kind of can't use it, or you just chop different parts up. I did a video about Fort Carroll, which is I tried to do the like, I kind of like would try to latch onto like a pop culture thing and like apply that to Baltimore, because I think people, have certain like emotional connection to something. So when I was a kid, Jurassic Park was like huge. Right. So what Fort Carroll is it's a pre-Civil War fort that's out in the middle of the Patapsco. So it's like a bird refuge now. So, in Jurassic Park, there was a big focus of how dinosaurs became birds. So it's like, here's an island, just like Jurassic Park was on an island. Here's birds that are like dinosaurs. So I'm just going to do it and use all the same, like this. I stole the music from Jurassic Park, which is, I'm sure John Williams or whoever, I think he wrote it. He probably is not pleased with that, but it's YouTube, and YouTube, as long as you can not use certain music, won't show up. It won't let you upload the video. But most of the time, I haven't had too much of issue with that.
I was going to ask, if you have any problems running into copyright problems with some of this music?
It will. I mean, my videos aren't usually monetized, but you have to get like 400,000 views to even make any money off it. So I've never ran into the problem. I'm not making any money, so I'm losing money probably on it technically. So I don't think they're going to come around asking anything like that.
And then the places you go to, you ever run into problems where people have said, you're not supposed to be here, or you get kicked out, or everything says no trespassing, but you do it anyway? Not
really. I mean, some of it's like, I guess you're not supposed to, but I think the thing that most people realize is like, people don't care. Like, if you saw someone do it, would you meet like, that guy's doing something bad? Like, you'd be like, he's probably supposed to be there. And I think that's how most people in reality is, because I've been, sort of trespassing different things, and I've never had anybody. Like, I've only seen a homeless guy in a building one time ever in hundreds of places I've gone to.
Because even though in your videos, you'll point out a lot of times, it looks like somebody's living here.
Yeah,
but there's nobody there when you're there.
There was a video, there's a building that burned in East Baltimore like probably 3 years ago by now, and I don't know who owns it. I assume the city probably owns it, at least at this point, but it's just in ruin. It's really weird because they haven't knocked it down. It's unusual because they'll usually demolish anything here, but it's like in ruins, and then you go up in the stairwell and you reach to the top and there's clearly a bed and stuff like that. I mean, somebody is living there. There was also another video I did near the Baltimore Streetcar Museum. There's a tunnel that I think it was called Glenn Edwards Avenue, if I'm getting that correct. It used to be a street that went through, but then they changed they put a BG substation on the other side, so they wanted to block that off. So then it's almost like a cave now, and there was definitely looked like new shoes. So like somebody was living in there, but I don't really ever seem to run into the people. Then maybe they're usually there at night. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're lucky in that, you don't get caught, but I don't think they'd do anything to you if they
No,
found
probably
you.
not. I'm sure they don't really care. This is Baltimore. They have like real problems that they are dealing with.
And of course, the places you go, you can say, "Hey, what about me? This place has
Yeah,
already been
it's better
vandalized
to
before I
ask
got
for
here."
forgiveness than
Right?
permission.
But I'm just saying, you could say it was vandalized before you even got there. That's the thing.
That's one good thing that comes with age is like they don't assume that you're doing something bad once maybe in your 30s or something.
Now, of all these different, and you do all kinds of different subject matter. I've seen crime, the few murders in Pigtown, the abandoned buildings, the festivals. What are your favorite subjects to shoot?
I mean, like we kind of said, I like history. So if I can, for instance, the tunnel I just brought up, that's like a weird thing that's like almost in the woods where like people would never know. So it's kind of like little tidbits of stuff that only like the real local people would ever know about. It's kind of like I like that stuff, and I don't really think there's a platform for getting that stuff out there. I did one recently about Lexington Market. They call it the Catacombs. That's something that they kind of just rediscovered a couple years ago, and they started to do tours. It's Baltimore Heritage does the tours. They stopped doing them for this year for some reason. I'm not really sure, but they might come back if you look that up. And it's basically like they built a parking garage in the 1950s over what used to be like part of the market, and then they discovered this whole like underground It kind of looked like a mixture of like a old basement with the parking garage kind of stuck down. The pillars are in it, and it's pretty cool. And you go through this restaurant to get into it. You go through like an abandoned restaurant. It was called Tubbs, and it closed in somebody said it closed in like the late 80s, and just nothing ever moved in. So it's like this kind of decrepit, decaying restaurant that used to have like go-go dancers and stuff like that. It seemed like a wild place back then.
But it looks, when I saw the video, it looks like almost like you could practically move in again today. The cash registers are still sitting
it had
there.
Seats
the
and
booths
everything.
and
Like
the seats
if you got a broom and a garbage can, you could probably clean it up all right. Had a little stage and everything.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean,
there's stuff like that everywhere, and Baltimore's a pretty good city about like not demolishing things that have value. They're fixing a lot of old buildings. They're actually, I believe statistically they are one of the best cities for historic preservation.
Because I think it was another one you did, and I've seen some other pictures other people have taken. I think it was the LeBeau Factory.
Yeah.
And you could go in there and you still see garments hanging on
that
hangers
is,
and all kinds of
It's now
stuff.
the Baltimore Design School, but I think the first time, probably like 10 years ago, if you watch season 4, the very first episode, the opening shot of that season of The Wire, the kids are playing in the alley and they're like trying to catch a pigeon or something. That's in the LeBeau alley, and then for the show they spray painted the kids' names on the door, and that was still there for like 8 years later or something like that. But then they went and they fixed the whole thing up, but it was I think it probably went into bankruptcy or something. So it was a clothing factory. I mean, the people literally were making the stuff there back then. Probably closed in the 80s, like mid 80s, I would think. And then I guess maybe the bank just like sealed the door and wouldn't let them take anything out, because there was just like row after row of like really nice trench coats and business suits and stuff like that were by this time, this was like 2009 or something, maybe, when I went in there. And so they were moldy and kind of gross, but not all of them were. I mean, some could be saved. There's people I'm sure homeless people probably went in there and got clothing and things like that.
Well, I'm amazed to see things in there too that like some of them have historic value, like an old Singer
Oh
machines,
yeah, like industrial sewing machines. If they weren't exposed to water and stuff, they probably would have been, good right now.
80s or 90s computers.
There's not so good.
No, but I'm just saying that maybe
it is funny to come across like really like old technology like that, like stuff like people. All those are a landfill now. Like there's some museum of technology somewhere that has one, but like you'll never see that. It had like, I think it probably wasn't even floppy. It has like punch cards to remember things. Like that's crazy.
Wow. But you talk a little bit about the narration, and you're usually not too comfortable with that. Because I was going to say to you, where your choices come in as a filmmaker to say you're going to do narration as opposed to titles, or just to let the pictures tell the story.
I try to do it in as if the person watching, I don't want to assume that they know about everything. So like for instance, In my latest video, it's going to be about the Arabber stables. I give the definition of what Arabbers are because I don't know. People outside of Baltimore probably don't know what it is. I mean, I think most people that watch this show probably are from Baltimore, but not necessarily. I mean, I want to capture like Baltimore culture as well so that people from outside could watch it. So I try to do definitions, and one thing that's one thing. It's like it's a constant evolution where it's like, all right, do I want to narrate this? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's kind of easier to do captions. I don't know if someone who's like hard of hearing or deaf would want to watch it, so then at least they can watch it and understand what I'm saying too.
Because to me, my favorite of the videos that you've done so far was the one on Daniels.
Yeah.
Because you talked about that when you looked history, but the fact not just that you were there and you kind of narrated and pointed stuff out, you gave perspective like, oh, there was an old car that was here when I was here so many years ago. It's not there now. Or make it very easy for people to follow you by saying, look, we came down this path. Now you go this way and you go up the hill here. So you're telling people, here I am right now. And this is where you go if you want to watch my video and do what I just did. You're like giving a visual map to them. Yeah, that's
like a big part of it is I want people to see the places and I want them to want to go there and do it themselves. Like most of the things, like I'll put the address of it. If it's a normal place, you can and you can just walk in the door. But the Daniels one, if you don't know what Daniels is, it was an old like textile mill town, and in 1972 when Hurricane Agnes come, it was right on the water, so it just destroyed everything. It knocked the houses and the churches and everything down. So different cars, like could have been cars from that area or things that were like upstream. It carried these cars. So, yet you can think of there's any number of like pre-1972 cars. So there was like a lot of like late 50s up until like early 70s, different types of cars. I have photographs of all the different cars, and I actually cataloged and like went and I had like an old Garmin GPS when I did this. So I actually like cataloged where each car was. So I know that for a fact that a lot of them are gone. The ones that are left behind, probably they must have, I don't know if they came and got a truck in there somehow and towed them out. I don't really know why. It was, environmentally, maybe it's not great, but it's 40, 50 years ago now. I don't think there's any oil left in them or anything like that.
Right. So I thought, that was, quite a good and interesting, a video that you had there. Who would you say is your target audience?
Probably, anybody interested in Baltimore. If you're from Baltimore, that's probably the target audience because, like I said before, I want people to go visit the site. So, if you're from out of state and you're like, oh, this actually has, things that would be interesting for me to come see. I would love people to come to Baltimore, but I want the people that are here to kind of appreciate the things that we have here and go check out different things. And, there's a lot of history here and there's a lot of culture that, over time things are changing. So I want people to kind of know about the past and kind of appreciate that different stuff.
Because I know, do you know about your audience? Do you have people who have seen your videos from out of state or away from Baltimore?
I don't know that much. A little thing pops up on my phone. It's like, oh, you have a new subscriber. But it's like, if they don't have a video really about themselves, I don't really know about a background. I try to post when I post a video, there's like a Baltimore Reddit. Reddit's a pretty popular thing. So, I guess probably only people from Baltimore are going to read that. I have a Facebook page and stuff like that for my photography that I'll post these things. And Instagram. Instagram's a really good platform for, you can only put a minute of video. So you're kind of like, it's almost like a little trailer you're putting on there. Or photographs, and I kind of like let people know, oh, there's a new episode or there's this. I think on Instagram, there's probably a lot of people from anywhere in the world that could be watching and be like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Because I'll get people from like India like my stuff. It's like, I don't know why you like my stuff, but I'm glad that you're following me.
But so because so maybe like on your YouTube videos, whether you get comments, and that might tell you.
I don't get a ton of comments. If anyone's watching and wants to comment, feel free. I love any kind of like feedback or everything. Is always good to know.
Right. And you film how frequently? Would you say?
There's almost a weekend that doesn't go by that I'm not filming something. It doesn't. Sometimes if life is too busy, like it's it's a thing on the side. I have other things to do. I might not produce. I try to produce one a week, but that's not always. I've never gone more than like 2.5 weeks for putting one out. And if something's longer and more involved, then it might take longer. But usually a week or two is probably about how many I'm putting out.
Because you've been doing Explore Baltimore videos for how long now?
I think March of 2017 was when I first put it out. So now I have 25 out now. Yeah. 26 will be coming out as the time we're filming this. Within the day, probably.
Oh, okay. So you're moving along pretty good. Because fooled me a little because I think, it was like an appeal for fundraising, but it said season 2. I mean,
yeah, it's
it
like,
depends on
well,
how
I was
many
kind of
episodes
thinking
you're considering a season.
like originally, like maybe if I got different equipment and it would really change the tone of the show, that would be like the season 2. But it probably will never be called season 2. It's just like, I guess like I have it under the desk here. I got this camera, which is a lot easier to film because it has like an articulated screen and things like that, and I have like microphones for that.
Pretty cool.
My old camera, it did video, but not as good. This thing was like kind of a game changer where I usually use a GoPro. It's a GoPro with a gimbal. So it's kind of like, it's like this where it stabilizes all the time. So that was the very first thing that I had to get. So I used to have a Canon 5D Mark II, which was a pretty high-end camera when it came out in like 2008 or 9. But now, I mean, that was like a $3,500 camera. So then the price went down over time, especially as I used it a whole bunch. So then I was like, well, I'm going to sell this camera and just buy whatever I can get. So then this camera now is about $1,000 or whatever, but honestly, it's not really, the technology has gotten so much better. It's not really any worse or anything like that. It's better for video. It's got a great screen, touch screen, all that thing. The lens got a lot of range, and it has I think it has in-body and lens stabilization, so that's a big thing because you can't if you walk around with this camera, it's not great, but if you're doing panning shots, it's really good. And then for walking around stuff, I'll use the GoPro with the gimbal.
Do you have plans at all or ideas about how to build your audience?
The only thing, I mean, not really. I just kind of put out stuff like, if you put out stuff like multiple different subject matters, I think that kind of will help expand your audience, but you never really know like what you're going to get. Like when I made the Fort Carroll video, probably is the most popular video I did, but like, do people like it because they like Jurassic Park? Do they like it because like they like urban exploration? I don't know. It's like there's any number of things. So I feel like just the more you do, like I'm probably at like 430 in the subscribers. So I would, if maybe by the end of the year I could get up to like 500, and then my goal would be like maybe after 1 year of doing shows to be at 1,000 if that's possible. But it seems like it definitely snowballs. Like once somebody likes it, I'm sure there's algorithms on YouTube where it suggests different things. So if you have a lot of different, someone might like drone videos and they're going to watch all kinds of drone stuff. I don't know. Right.
Yeah, well. And do you meet with or network with any other Baltimore filmmakers? Or documentary filmmakers?
Not so much filmmakers. I have a network of a lot of friends that just from photography. So I'm Facebook friends with. There's some people I haven't met necessarily, but a lot of them I have. So sometimes we'll go out and shoot, and they may be with me when I film stuff, but they don't really want to be in it per se. Okay. I don't really know a lot of people that are into the video aspect of it much. I mean, I've had some people contact me like, oh, we should go out shooting sometime, but like the way I do it is like I'm literally just driving my car and like, oh, this I need to go. This is an interesting like. There's a police situation here. Let me go film that. It's difficult to plan for that ahead of time. So in the future, if I was able to do like a more interesting, bigger production, I'd bring more people on. But I also kind of like having the total control over, the product I'm making. So it's almost just easy to have like 2 cameras and, to keep it small and simple. If that's what people like, if they're liking that, then I don't see a reason to deviate from that too much.
Now, the still photography you've done, have you ever had any of it on exhibit?
I've never done a show. I've had there's like a Baltimore Heritage site. I was like the grand prize winner for a calendar that they did last year. I'm in the newer calendar that they're doing, but I think it's probably only a smaller like runner-up kind of thing. I've won like certain awards over time, but I don't know. I've never even like printed a photo I've done. I don't really think, I'm more of like thinking like, what's the next thing I want to take a picture of, and then dwelling too much like on what I've done, I guess.
You sound a little bit like the guy, I don't know if you've seen it, that just opening a photo exhibit at the Maryland Historical Society, some guy who chronicled Baltimore from like the 80s to about 2000 when he died, early 2002.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested, like, 10 years from now or something, when I have these photos that are like, they might have seemed mundane almost in a way at the time. They're like, oh man, I missed that thing, or I wish that was still around or something. I really like that. That's definitely like one of my favorite things. If you look at like old pictures of Baltimore from like, Howard Street from like the 40s, I mean, it is night and day. It really, it makes me nostalgic for something I never experienced. Like, I'm more nostalgic for other people's like childhoods than I am my own.
Well, and then someday maybe somebody will feel the same about your photos. You just think about it that way. and I think you. Now, what about the fundraising? I know you have a Patreon account and also a GoFundMe page.
Yeah, I have Patreon is like you subscribe to it. So usually people will donate like a smaller amount a month. I only have like, I want to say like 4 people donating. It changes. They can change it anytime. So it's hard to keep track of that. GoFundMe is literally I'm going to give this guy $20 and they get it. But I've probably made $100 in that. So it's like, I'm not raking in the money.
Off of that.
I'd love any donations people can get, but it's not, I'm still going to make it either way.
And what about, have there been anything that you want to film that you haven't filmed yet? What are some of your favorite things I want to do?
I'm sure there's a ton of them. I've already filmed upcoming. Eventually, I've already filmed like a whole bunch of stuff about the B&O Railroad Museum. I did already have an episode about the repair shop.
Right.
That one's aired. I have already made some videos about the B&O, but it's like I have to finish the bulk of it. I prefer to make videos about one subject if possible. If I can get enough content, like you were saying earlier, where like how do you decide? It's like I just don't have enough content to make a whole episode about something. So I would prefer to do it like that. But it's just like, you get, this, like October is a busy month of all sorts of different, like, one day event type things. Right. So then as the winter goes on, I've already filmed a whole segment about the Baltimore Museum of Industry. I have one that'll come up eventually about, there was a record breaking ship that came to Domino Sugar, like the biggest ship they've ever had. I did drone footage of that. So I have a lot of stuff that's like, I just don't have the time to edit all of it or whatever. So there's a lot of stuff in the works. As far as like, things in the future, I'd like to do one about different cemeteries. I think like famous dead people and where they're buried. I had a whole like thing planned out for October. I was like, I'm gonna make a lot of like scary, spooky Halloween type videos. I didn't make a single one. So eventually, in the middle of winter or like in the spring, there'll be a bunch of like Halloween videos for some reason.
There you go. But I noticed you mentioned the ship with the Domino Sugar, the big container ship, or the biggest or whatever, and it came here. It seems to me you also have an interest in Maritime because there are 3 different videos that have something about the John W. Brown and then the nuclear ship Savannah.
Yeah, that's funny because the John Brown came to Fells Point just to do tours. So I had my drone. I was like, oh, that'd be cool to drone it. So like I'm on the other side of the harbor because you got to kind of think you're not really you shouldn't do it over people. Like it's better to fly over water or somewhere where if it goes down, it's not going to hurt anybody. Yeah. So I was like, I'll go on the other side of the harbor and fly it. So then, unbeknownst to me, like the people there are like, what is this thing? Like, where is it coming from and who is doing this? So then I made a video about that. And then people from the ship were like, we really liked your video. Why don't you come on they do a cruise twice a year in Baltimore. I think they do other ones else. Sometimes they go to New York or whatever. Okay. So they're like, come, we'll just give you a free ticket to come on the thing. And you kind of make a little video of like the actual cruise. Nice. And it was really fun. It was really awesome. The only downside was the weather was awful. It was like raining. The most wind I've ever experienced was like on the bridge of that ship, and the wind is like you're like near the key bridge, like just whipping. Yeah. Like if you have a hat on, the thing is gone, and it was really crazy. So that's kind of a good like I'd love people to come and be like, hey, I have this interesting thing, or I do this thing. Why don't you come film for me? I would love people to do that. I've never had anybody really offer me suggestions. I'm certainly not out of ideas for things to do. Right. Yet. I mean, eventually, maybe I will be. Well,
okay. And what about the nuclear ship? I thought that was a great one too.
Yeah, they do. There's a Maritime Day, which it's just one time a year. So like I kind of like said that earlier, where if something's having an open house or there's some sort of event, I'll try to film it then. So I thought that's it is permanently in Baltimore. It's not like from Baltimore. Right. It's permanently on there. You can maybe go on it other times. It's not open as much. I think John Brown you can go on. Yeah. Like at least maybe on the weekends or something like that. So that's open once a year. So I was like, oh, I know that's coming up. I definitely want to film that. I thought it was like just an interesting. It's very like it looked like something from Mad Men on the inside. Like it's a weird mixture of like purpose industrial thing. It is a cargo ship. But then the inside has a lot of style. It's very like space age, where it has like nuclear, atom symbols everywhere. It's really cool.
Yeah. And where do you see yourself as a filmmaker or Explore Baltimore going in the future? Do you have ideas where you want to take this or what you want to do with this career of yours?
I suppose like eventually, if I just like run out of things to do, or if events come back the next year, I don't know if I'd really attempt to re-film. Like if I got different equipment and it was so much, like the quality could be so much better, I would do it. But I think like someday it will probably just end. I mean, I guess it'll have its run, and then it'll kind of exist as like a period in time where if people, oh, what about the Rawlings Conservatory? I can go watch a video of how it was back then. It's hard to say. I'd love to do more video stuff and maybe like take it to the next level, but it's just like time and money. Video things are super expensive, so I'm sure you guys know.
We know
it's all
about
set
that.
up.
Okay, and so you had 25 now. I haven't seen 25. I didn't see that posted. Maybe you posted it today, but
Last
was it
Sunday or
really?
Saturday?
The last one I saw was Rollins Conservatory, but
isn't that 25? I don't know. You watched probably more of them recently.
that was 24.
Oh, was it? All right. Well, then 25 is coming out soon.
That's coming up soon.
Maybe tonight.
The one on the Arab farm in the city.
Yeah.
But okay. And so that's about it, except for you got to tell people here, look into your camera, tell people how to find your videos.
It's pretty easy. It's just go to youtube.com/explore Baltimore. That's it. Simple as can be. I mean, all the videos should just be chronological to how I post them. I've thought about even going back and kind of re-editing certain older videos, because like I have that content and the video is fine, but like, I'm learning the program and everything as I go. So it's like, oh, this could be better. Like these titles could be better or something like that. So I thought like maybe even on like the 1 year anniversary, kind of re-releasing some of the older ones just to like spice them up a little bit or whatever, make them better.
Well, there you go.
That might happen.
A future plan. There you go.
Yeah.
So again, I want to thank you for stopping by here today, and it was great discovering another Baltimore filmmaker.
Thank you. I'm really cool what you guys are doing here.
All right. Thank you for
Thanks.
being here. And folks, that's the end of another Paul Stefan show. We'll see you next time when we have another interesting guest for you. And remember, this is your show, and let us know if there's anybody you want us to interview or any subjects you want us to cover. Good night.
You're watching The Paul Stefan Show on TV Free Baltimore.